Thank you. Okay. Item number 31, please.
Appeal of Architectural Board of Review Design Review Approval for Neighborhood Traffic Calming and Safe Routes to School Projects.
Okay, Mr. Lamone, is this yours?
Yes, it is, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. The appeal before you today involves the ABR's decision to grant final approval of a city improvement project that occurred on February 5th, 2007. The two projects under appeal are the Neighborhood Traffic Calming project and the Safe Routes to School project. A brief description of the project. The project that was presented to the ABR included three typical improvements. They consisted of traffic circles, curb bulb outs, and median islands. I will not be describing in detail every intersection improvement. However, there are several locations proposed. Locations of the project for the neighborhood traffic calming are traffic circles at Olive Street and Sola Street, and bulb outs at Garden Street and Isley Street, and Garden Street at Arriaga Street, and a median island at Garden Street and Isley Street. The St. Francis Area Mobility Plan was adopted by City Council in December 2003. Here is a slide of the map showing the traffic calming locations. The key dates relative to this project involved the city establishing a neighborhood traffic management program in November of 2001. In April 2002, Public Works initiated the pilot program in the St. Francis neighborhood area. In December 2003, Council adopts the St. Francis Mobility Plan. In September 2004, the temporary traffic calming devices were installed. And in April 2006, Council authorized staff to proceed with the installation of the projects and to require ABR review of the project. The appeal issues presented today involve two types of categories. Those that are relevant to design review and those that are not relevant. The majority of appeal issues depicted here and raised by the appellant have been already decided and previously discussed by Council. However, Public Works staff is here and available and prepared to answer specific questions relative to the two projects under appeal. The appeal issues, as indicated, involve the failure of city staff to meet its own requirements of receiving at least 65% neighborhood approval of projects, the failure of city staff to collect before and after data on intersections with roundabouts and bulb outs, the failure of city to install temporary bulb outs at Garden Street and Arriaga Streets, and the arbitrary, capricious, and incorrect application of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. These are issues raised by the appellant. With respect to design review concerns, they have raised aesthetic impacts on the historic neighborhoods and a proliferation of ugly, obtrusive, and confusing signage, and coercive tactics used against ABR, resulting in after-the-fact doctoring of minutes to reflect a result more favorable to the city staff. I will be focusing on those two areas regarding the appeal. At ABR, the ABR reviewed this project in great detail at 5 separate reviews. The ABR expressed concerns initially regarding the need and effects associated with the bulb outs and traffic circles. Specifically, the traffic circles. They struggled with the design concept and what would be appropriate within the middle center of the street. At some locations, there were manholes under the proposed traffic circles, and there were specific questions on how to avoid this problem. It resulted in December 18th, 2006 decision to actually vote to approve the project with the exclusion of the traffic circles. Subsequent to that date, staff asked at the next board meeting to clarify those minutes and why the traffic circles were not acceptable. The ABR was indicated at the time that they wanted to indicate that the traffic circles were problematic and considered aesthetically detrimental. And when pressed further, they responded that the concerns regarding the traffic circles primarily were associated with the potential for traffic skid marks to deteriorate the improvements in the center of the roadway, along with associated signage with the circles. In this January of 2007, staff was advised on its role and authority to approve or deny the project. And the reason was Public Works had requested that clarification because at that point there was an indication that the ABR might deny the traffic circles. So staff, our Community Development Director, Paul Casey, prepared a staff memorandum and indicated to the ABR that their primary role was to look at the aesthetics regarding the project, and that the decision to install the traffic improvements had already been decided by council, and they should proceed on that direction. ABR approved finally the project on February 6, 2007 with a number of changes in design features. Staff position on this project is that the ABR approved designs with sufficient reviews and public input, that there were reasonable enhancements made to the project design, and the project design has been altered in an attempt to be sensitive to neighborhood and historic settings by the increased landscaping in the project areas, the enhanced paving, such as the use of sandstone, and the improved symmetry and alignment of bulb outs and ramps. Our ABR board member, Gary Moselle, is here to answer questions specific regarding those improvements that were made to the project. What I wanted to discuss is the historic setting of the site. As council is aware that we do have a Lower Riviera survey area that's presently being surveyed for historic significance, and at this point we have completed a survey of the Lower Riviera portion, which has identified a special design district. City Council has adopted specific design guidelines in this area. And how this relates to the proposed projects is that in the center core we do have a proposed city historic district. And the question was, well, will these improvements impact the historic setting? And what we've indicated here on this mobility plan, that only 4 locations are impacting that potential historic district, and they're all located on the perimeter boundaries of the proposed district. And so this is indicating that not all the proposed intersections are within that sensitive historic area. Based on the following, planning staff and ABR have limited authority also to condition the traffic control safety devices. They were presented to the ABR as a safety issue, and therefore, as much as they wanted to try to change the design of the intersections, they in fact were limited to the aesthetics and the concerns regarding the landscaping and the pedestrian flows through the intersection. Planning staff have provided appropriate direction to the ABR regarding its role in clarification of the minutes. That it was appropriate to ask for clarification of the minutes. So if there was a question about why those traffic circles were unacceptable, there would be additional record in the minutes to explain what issues and concerns they had regarding these traffic circles. But eventually the council or the ABR did follow council's directions and did approve the circles with the enhancements they thought were appropriate. So staff's recommendation is to deny the appeal and uphold the ABR decision. So at this point, Browning Allen is prepared to answer questions relative to some issues that were raised in the appeal, if you so choose.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we should hear from Gary Mosel, though, ABR. If you would like to, if you have anything, you can come up here and the microphone's on, just so we can hear from you, from the ABR.
We did review this project extensively, and there was a time when the board was not happy with the bulb outs, or as we called them, the dots or the traffic circles.
That's on. Just a minute. Let me turn it off and back on there. Try to get. Talk a little louder.
We did have some issues with the traffic circles, but they were resolved in other meetings, and we think that what we were given and what direction we were given to do, we did a good job at it. We made quite a few changes to it, aesthetically sandstone, lots of landscaping differences, tree changes, and there was all of those items that were covered. So we're happy with the decision that we made.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Williams?
I just wanted to tell you, Gary, from my perspective, that I don't know if the speakers aren't working, but
We'll check on it. The lights are
I'll
on.
speak
Usually
louder.
people don't have a problem. Yeah.
Gary, from my perspective, staff, it was appropriate that staff gave some direction and or reminded you that we had authorized these. But I also want you to know that it is okay with me and for you guys to complain about anything you want to, and I don't think you should be silenced in any way. So I think that part of what staff did was perfectly appropriate, but I also feel like you should hear from us that you can tell us if you don't like something, if you do like something, and we will react hopefully to those comments.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Mr. Horton. Sure, if you'd like to.
Mr. Williams, I don't think that the ABR felt that their hands were tied on this issue. We also have a specific set of rules and guidelines that we have to follow, and sometimes we stray from those and go a little bit farther than we need to and go into a little bit of the planning of it. And part of it is okay for the ABR to do, but mostly we are headed towards the aesthetic and on how the public perceives the view of it and not the mechanics of a project.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Horton.
I had raised some questions with Mr. Allen, such as the procedure on the percentage on voting and some other questions. And are you going to get into that in your presentation, or do we need to go through those one by one, or how would you like to handle that?
Yeah, Mr. Allen.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Horton, I can answer those questions right now. I wasn't going to do a detailed presentation. I will talk to a couple of points. There are 4 areas that were mentioned in the appeal letter. One was that the city staff failed to meet its own requirement of receiving at least 65% support from the residents. We did 3 separate...
Yeah, none of the speakers are on right now.
I'll talk as loud as I can. But we did 3 separate balloting measures, and the reason we did 3...
we're working on it.
The reason we did 3 canvassing in the neighborhood was not to change the results, is that we felt that we weren't getting enough response. We wanted to make sure we got an adequate response and got the view of the people who live in our neighborhood. And we did 3 separate contacts with the neighbors. The first one received 90% support, again another 90% support, 85% support, and 80% support. Overall, the results was 85% of those people who responded were in support of moving forward with the neighborhood mobility plan. We had a 30% response rate of those people who were eligible to return or respond to the canvassing. So we did comply with that provision. The other one was that they mentioned that the failure of the city staff to collect before and after data. When we came before council last April, council asked us, are we going to evaluate the effectiveness of these traffic control devices after they had been installed? So the after data will not be collected until after they have been installed permanently. That will be part of the evaluation process that we will use before going back to the Transportation and Circulation Committee and the Council to make a determination whether or not we're going to proceed with installation of the other devices that are in this neighborhood. The before data was collected and is contained in the neighborhood mobility plan for the St. Francis area. So we do have the before data, and we will analyze and compare data afterwards. We have done some a little bit informal calculations, that we have seen a reduction in speed at the traffic circles as a result of the temporary installations. The other area was failure to install the semi-permanent traffic control devices, basically the bulb outs at Garden and Arriaga. It's not a requirement of the our draft plan. Something that we were doing on a trial basis in some areas. The sawhorses and cones that we're using showed that the curb extensions were working. When council gave us the direction to move forward with the permanent design and installation of all the traffic calming devices, we decided that it was not cost effective or necessary to move forward with the temporary installation or the semi-permanent installation, so we decided not to do that. And we did discuss that with 3 council members prior to that council meeting. And the 4th area that they mentioned was not following the manual and uniform traffic control devices. They did not specifically give any sections of the MUTCD that we're not following, but our design professionals and staff does follow the MUTCD in all applications, and we would not ignore that document. I'll be happy to answer any questions the council might have on the appeal itself. Otherwise, I can go into some other areas.
There are some people who are standing. If you can find a seat, there's plenty of seats over here. You turn in your slips up here. We're going to stop collecting them in 5 minutes. We usually stop collecting them when the item is introduced, but it looks like we have a lot of speaker slips. I don't know if is there anything else then from the staff's point of view? I know, just let me find out if they're talking to each other. Second. Okay. Okay, Drew Van Hingel wants to talk. And then we are only going to allow, actually it says in our rules we allow 1 minute per speaker, but we find that pretty restrictive. So 2 minutes is what we have found in the past works. And my council members up here, we went through 30-some people. We went through a hearing about last week or the week before where I allowed 4 planning commissioners to speak for about over an hour. And the people who are next to me on both my left and right were not very happy with me. So I won't let that happen again. I think a couple minutes you can make your point, and you can always say you agree with the people before you or you don't agree and that sort of thing, and we will try to move through this so we're all so our brains are all working really well at the end is what we want to try to do. 31 speakers. Okay. Okay, Ms. Van Hingel, you want to go ahead? You're going to have to talk loud. I don't know what's wrong with our speakers, but go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I'll take this.
Okay, Mr. Allen.
There were 2 intersections that we were in the working with the fire department that were of particular concern with the engine company at Station 3 in terms of being able to negotiate and navigate through those intersections. Ms. Van Hingel and myself and our Public Works Director have met with the fire marshal and the fire chief to discuss what their concerns were. The first one is Sola at Olive. It's about a half a block away from Station 3. And the primary concern was coming down Sola from Station 3 and making a right-hand turn onto Olive Street. What it turned out to be, the curb extensions that were proposed in the intersections as well as the traffic circle was making it difficult. What they found when a car approached the intersection, well, they were going to make the right-hand turn. They didn't know what to do, and there wasn't enough room for them to get out of the way. So what we have decided to do is remove those curb extensions, because the circle will work. What we have also decided to do, working with them, is making the interior of the whole traffic circle mountable. So if they have a need to drive over the circle, they can do that. So it's basically the interior. This is going to be a rolling curb. It's going to be rolled on the outside as well as on the inside, so their wheels won't get hung up on the circle. The other intersection that was of particular concern to the fire department was the intersection of Sola and Alta Vista. There is difficulty. It's a tight intersection, but we have a significant issue with the speed of cars coming down Alta Vista as they approach Sola Street. The fire department cannot make the turn from Sola onto Alta Vista. What we have, in working with the fire department, we're making this circle mountable, similar to what we're doing at Sola and on Olive. So both the interior and exterior of the interior ring of the circle will be mountable, so the fire department can roll over it. There's not a chance of the dual wheels in the back of the fire engine getting stuck. And the only effect is maybe damaging some landscaping. Staff will go out and repair it. And so we...
excuse me, just 1 second. Some people are being very rude, and we don't do that around here. We're trying to be as civil as we can. People who are laughing and that sort of thing. If you want to do that, you can go in that back room right back there in room 15, and there's a TV there. And you'll probably be able to hear better, but we really don't want to hear booing or whatever. It's really not okay. I mean, and on either side.
People in the back can't hear him.
Well, if they can't hear him, they can hear him on television, most likely. I can't fix the speakers right now. I'm not a miracle worker. Okay, Mr. Allen. I think it's working fine because you're all hearing me. Mr. Allen, go ahead.
Okay, so working with the fire department, we made those 2 changes to those 2 intersections. Chief Prince is here, as well as the fire marshal, Russ Kohler, here to answer any questions the council might have with regards to the fire department.
Okay. Okay. Chief Prince, do you have anything? Or I'm putting you on the spot here, but this is the fire chief right here who might have something to say about these.
Thank you, Mayor
Sure,
Bloom.
go ahead.
Yeah, actually, what Browning just mentioned is correct. We've gone back and recently done some field testing to validate that the new designs will work for us. We've mitigated our original concerns. There was a difference between a vertical curb and a mountable angled curb. So now we can negotiate those turns. So yeah, I'm agreeing with the position of our traffic engineer.
Okay.
And luckily, we got it all worked out.
Okay, thank you. And is there anything else? Ms. Van Hingel, did you want to, I keep calling on you, I didn't mean to, but I just see you sitting up there. And that's fine. If they have questions for you, we'll talk to you about it. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Ms. Falcone, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Allen, could you go back just for clarification, because I'm not sure when you went over this, your speaker was off, so, and I don't know that I heard it exactly right, but could you go back over just the canvassing number? When you canvassed the neighborhood and you had the public outreach and you sent out the inquiries, you got a 30% response back, is that correct?
That's correct.
And of that 30% back out of the whole, 85% were in favor of moving forward. Is that the number?
That is correct.
Okay, so out of the whole, it's about, what is that, 28% or something like that? 27% of the folks?
I'll trust your math.
Okay, but it satisfies the regulation. Is that what you're
Absolutely.
saying to me? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and actually, Drew reminded me, in our program guidelines, the canvassing is advisory, and basically they're giving advice, and so when we brought it before the Transportation Circulation Committee, we wanted to show what type of neighborhood support we had to implement the mobility plan before moving forward with it. In this case, we had overwhelming support to move forward of those people who responded.
Okay. We could go ahead then with the people who would like to speak. I did receive we've received some emails, but I received a letter from the Bungalow Haven Neighborhood Association. Is there anybody here to speak for the Bungalow Haven neighbors? Joe, okay. Would you like to come up?
Joe?
Are you going to be doing that? Yeah, but it's not is it a regular half hour and all that sort of thing, like we do when there's a project? Okay. Okay, we'll call on the appellants first. I just wanted to make sure that the Bungalow Haven neighbors are also heard, besides, and the appellants too, of course. Just one second, let me grab my thing here. Okay. Then it's to the appellants, who have a presentation. I didn't know that. That's good. Thank you. State your name for the record and
I shall.
make your presentation.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm Dale Francisco, Secretary of Santa Barbara Safe Streets. 3 months ago, I filed an appeal on behalf of our organization asking that you overturn a decision of the Architectural Board of Review. That decision on February 5th approved the permanent construction of so-called traffic calming devices in the Upper East Side, the Lower Riviera, and around Santa Barbara High School. The story of how the ABR came to make a decision that we feel goes against the interests of the people of this city is a complicated one. And I'm going to ask two fellow members of our organization to help me explain it to you. I also want, skip that, things have changed. We will show that the ABR was misled about the inception of this project and about the level of citizen support for it. We will show that despite the enormous amount of staff time put into it over the years, this project was ill-conceived and carelessly implemented, and that it ignored the lessons of traffic calming in cities such as Seattle and San Mateo, cities with far more experience and far larger professional engineering staffs than we have. We will show that staff withheld relevant, indeed vital, information on safety from the ABR. Finally, we will show that staff overstepped the bounds of their authority and attempted, with much success, to unjustly limit the scope of the board's review and to pressure the ABR into rescinding an earlier decision that was not to staff's liking.
Rob, can you look for that foamy thing?
Oh, just one second. We're going to this. I think we need Gorilla Glue or whatever that stuff is. There you go. It keeps falling off. It's happened several weeks in a row. Ms. Self?
Can I give a packet for everybody?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity of hearing our appeal. Oh, you're on. Okay. My name is Michael Self, and I'm president of Santa Barbara Safe Streets. I'm going to discuss the lack of community support for traffic calming in our city. The ABR had good instincts to deny this plan. Staff has tried to give the appearance that the public overwhelmingly wants these obstacles when, in fact, they are working against the will of the people. Staff withheld information from the ABR and City Council. So here's part of the plan. Each dot, star, and cross notes these obstacles where these obstacles will be installed. This map is not complete. It does not have all the locations for future installations. This slide shows a petition for support that was circulated to the residents in the spring of 2003. The terms for approval are clearly stated on this petition, and I quote, "I understand that the design and construction of the plan are contingent upon the approval of 65% of the property owners in the neighborhood," end quote. In May of 2003, the ballot on this slide was mailed to garner the required support. Note the same support is required, and I quote from this ballot. "An approval rating of 65% will constitute acceptance of the plan and make the plan eligible for adoption by council," end quote. And please note that both of these first two had only a support position. This slide shows a ballot mailed in September of 2003. It's the third and final attempt to get the necessary approval. This slide shows the term of approval, and I quote, "If you are a property owner, you may indicate your support or opposition by checking the box below and signing here," end quote. This is the only ballot that gave an opportunity for anyone to voice opposition. Again, the conditions are, and I quote, "With 65% of support for the conceptual plan of the property owners, we can move on to address any concerns you have about particular design details." You see on the screen that there were 1,118 parcels in the neighborhood. They received 343. This is 31%. It's less than half of the required property owners' support. They needed 65%. Many residents withdrew their support with the plan after the temporary obstacles were installed. The city received 1,000 phone complaints, and 300 citizens signed a petition against traffic calming that was submitted here to council. On Monday, August 8th, 2005, Roger Horton sent this email to the Traffic Division, and I quote, "We have been precinct walking in the neighborhood where the new traffic calming devices have been installed. We make detailed notes of every comment we get. The people out there are vehement in their opposition to the devices. I will provide you with a summary of their remarks." This summary was not provided to us through our public document request. Where is that summary? It's evident that the majority of the people do not want these devices installed on their streets. The city did not get the specified approval from the property owners as required by this program. You were misled. We're expecting you will stop all work on traffic calming now. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The report
Hello.
from Brownie
Can you
here.
state your name, please?
I'm sorry.
I know
My
you
name is
are.
Jim Westby, Vice President
Thanks.
of Santa Barbara Safe Streets, and I'll review the Fire Department's objections to this program. This information was obtained from our public record search And this is new information here that we just picked up probably within the last 3 days, which is some miracle that just took place. Because when I show you what I'm going to show you, you'll wonder how this ever happened. I'm also going to discuss other safety problems with this program. Let's first review a letter from Fire Marshal sent to the City Transportation Engineer on November 15, 2006. Now, this is 5 weeks prior to the December 18th ABR meeting. And I quote, "There are several issues that determine the fire department's position. First and foremost is the safety of our firefighters and that of the community while responding to incidents. The second issue is the reduction of response time to an emergency. The third is the ability for rapid evacuation due to wildfires. And the fourth is damage to fire apparatus. It is also important to note that there should be no traffic calming devices or narrowing of roadways on any access road in the city's designated high fire zone or on primary response routes." End of quote. Now, in reference to Sola and Olive intersection, and I quote from the Fire Marshal, "This traffic calming device should be removed. This particular device poses a real problem to the fire department. This causes several problems with response in trying to navigate both the circle and bulb out extensions. The narrowed roadways do not meet the fire department minimum width standards for turning. Each traffic lane is choked down to 12 feet. The other issue is the left-hand turn. The engine has to be carefully navigated this circle or end up having to back up due to contact in the opposite corner. This can cause a delay, as backing up requires the engine to stop and the firefighter to get off and back up the engine." End of quote. Now, in reference to Sola and Alta Vista intersection, it is impossible for a fire truck to make a left-hand turn without cutting in front of the circle. Now, this is only legal when responding to an emergency. They can do this when it's an emergency. Now, the Fire Marshal said, and I quote, "This device should be removed, taken out. This device, being a legal traffic control device, does not allow our staff to travel against traffic or device unless responding to Code 3, which is an emergency. Any person who would go against the posted traffic control would incur personal liability. We don't want that to happen." Now I'd like to show you a follow-up letter from the Fire Marshal sent to the Transportation Manager on January 18th, stating that these concerns were not addressed by the ABR. And I quote, "I guess that I had expected that these concerns would have been included in any future reviews of these devices. From the information that was presented to ABR on December 18th, 2006, our comments were not included or referred to." So the letter was sent on the 15th, a follow-up letter was sent on the 18th, and there was no communication with ABR in the between. Let's now look at the primary response routes maps for the fire department. Now, these routes are shown in red. You can see where the dot is on Sola. We had a blown up here, right there, that identifies the fire station location. Also note that Sola is a designated primary response route. Also mentioned in the Fire Marshal's letter is no traffic calming intersection should be placed on a primary response route. There was also communication by the past Fire Marshal in an email to the mobility coordinator shown here, as far back as March of 2003, and I quote, "First, I'm assuming that none of the streets that these measures are being proposed for are designated primary response routes." Now, I'd like to show you a quote from the city of San Mateo and what they say about their emergency response routes, their policy on emergency response routes. And I quote, "Streets designated as emergency response routes serve a special purpose for the city's residents. In times of emergency, it is imperative that ambulances and fire trucks be given priority on city streets. For this reason, physical traffic calming measures intended to impede traffic flow, chokers, speed humps, road closers, etc., are not appropriate on emergency response routes because they significantly delay emergency vehicles and potentially put lives at risk. End of quote. Now, based on this project as shown here in blue circles, a little ahead of ourselves here, we have 4 traffic calming intersections for this project that fall on primary response routes, and you can read them. Now, finally, I'd like to show you an email from the Public Works Department to Penn, Phil, and Smith on February 12th. Now, this letter asked for another redesign just 1 week after final ABR approval, February 5th. How could this be? We just got approval. Now, we heard the results of this letter and the redesign that have just taken place, but it was after the ABR approval. So how could it get through ABR? In summary, ABR was not made aware of the fire department's safety concerns. They didn't know about it. In addition, traffic calming devices should never be placed on primary response routes. I now would like to review some additional safety and appearance problems that Public Works and ABR have not yet resolved. I first would like to mention we're not talking about large roundabouts that have 100-foot diameter circles. We are talking about mini rounds and mini circles. These have special problems and special requirements, not associated with large roundabouts. Let's look first at pedestrian safety. Now, this picture shows the proposed intersection of Olive and Sola. You can see the flow of traffic through the outer circle goes right through the crosswalk. With no stop signs, we don't have stop signs on these intersections, this is especially dangerous and a very poor design. Also, please note, over in this area here, how the bulb outs choke down the streets as you enter the circle. This forces cyclists into the traffic lane to merge with vehicles. Now, some of the funding for this program is from Safe Routes to School grants. This design sure doesn't look like a safe route to school for our children. Would you want your child to ride their bikes through this intersections and walk on these crosswalks going to school? Let's look at a design from the Federal Highway Administration. Now, you can see here the crosswalks are way back out of the intersection. You can't be in the circle and go through the crosswalk. Much better design. We've also not seen where bulb outs and traffic circles are used together. Now, here's a picture of a bulb out on Sola and Olive. It was recently painted, but you can see where the cars and trucks are running into it with all the marks on it. Another safety issue. Now, lastly, I want to show you a picture of the traffic calming intersection on Alta Vista and Victoria. Besides being very unattractive, it is a picture of confusion. The driver has to read and understand no less than 15 signs and street markings and be aware of any cyclists, pedestrians, and other vehicles all in a split second. Very, very confusing and difficult. Now look at this four-way stop sign intersection on Victoria and Sola. Simple, uncluttered, and easy to understand. Now, at the end of our presentation today, we're going to show you a short video of this confusion and difficulty in action. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor and council members, I will start with a very brief history of the ABR and then look more closely at its powers and duties, since this is a main point of contention with staff. Then I will walk you through the ABR meeting of December 18th, 2006, in which the mini roundabouts were rejected. Finally, I will discuss the ABR meeting of January 2nd, 2007, in which the board reopened without public notice discussion of an already approved project and, under the guise of amending the minutes, rewrote the board's motion of December 18th to make it appear as if the mini roundabouts had not been rejected. Santa Barbara Architectural Board of Review was the first such board to be established by law anywhere in the United States. It came into being by City Council ordinance a week after the quake in June 1925. Then, as now, it was composed of citizen volunteers who wanted to make this a better city and to preserve its natural and architectural beauty for posterity. In 1949, it was voted by the people into the city charter, placing its power and authority beyond the whims of any particular city government. First, let's look at who was meant to serve on the ABR. Reading from Section 814 of the City Charter, quote, "There shall be an architectural board of review composed of 9 members. At least 2 members of such board shall be licensed architects. At least 3 other members shall possess professional experience in related fields, including but not limited to landscape architecture, building design, structural engineering, or industrial design." Clearly, the citizens who put the ABR in the charter wanted board members who could recognize and reject not only those projects that were aesthetically out of step with Santa Barbara, but also those that were structurally unsound or unsafe. Now let's look at the board's powers as defined in the charter. Paraphrasing, it states that, quote, "The board shall have the power and duty to review and approve, conditionally approve or disapprove all applications for a building permit within any area, district, or zone of the city." In other words, except for those projects reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission, the ABR may review and approve or disapprove any non-trivial building project anywhere in Santa Barbara. On December 18th, 2006, the city's traffic calming project came before the ABR for the third and supposedly final review. At least half the board members were very dubious about mini roundabouts, particularly the one at Sola and Olive near the fire station. Here is a statement by the city's then supervising transportation planning engineer, Tully Clifford, trying to allay those concerns. And I'm sorry I don't have slides for these. And I quote, this is the one, this intersection, where there was a lot of concern about the tree being in the center, so we turned the tree into signs. So rather than having a tree, in fact, we'll just mount the signs directly in the center. Again, we'll have the mountable curb. The fire department, in this particular case, should they choose, can drive right over the top of it and just have one limited sign, one sign limiting their ability to fully traverse the intersection, end quote. Board member Mark Winkie found this idea of fire trucks driving over a 4-inch curb into a landscape mini roundabout and then out over another 4-inch curb rather odd. He asked the city engineer, quote, "You made a statement earlier, I think it was on the Sola Street one, that the fire trucks may drive over it. So we should be assuming that 10 times out of 10, when a fire truck comes into that corner, because they're right down the street there, that they will be going over the curb, the center part," end quote. The city engineer replied, quote, "No, Mr. Chairman, I think that that's not our assumption. The fire department has just requested that in the case they need to, not as a standard operating procedure," end quote. Now you heard from Jim Westby that this same engineer had received a letter a month earlier from the fire chief saying not that fire trucks might occasionally need to drive over this mini roundabout, but rather that it was a totally unavoidable obstacle that needed to be removed for the safety of both firefighters and citizens. I would like to read to you from the Code of Ethics of the American Society of Civil Engineers, an organization that virtually every professional civil engineer in this country belongs to. In order to become a member, one must swear an oath to uphold this code. Canon 3, Section B states, quote, "Engineers shall be objective and truthful in professional reports, statements, or testimony. They shall include all relevant and pertinent information in such statements, reports, or testimony," end quote. Despite the dubious assurances staff provided, the ABR showed some courage that day and ultimately refused to allow the mini roundabouts to go forward, though the rest of the project was given conditional approval. After 10 days had passed without an appeal from the Transportation Division, we assumed that the decision was legally final. We were wrong. Apparently, behind the scenes, outside of any public forum, ABR members met with staff to discuss the city's unhappiness with this outcome. Unbelievably, at the next meeting of the ABR on January 2nd, 2007, the draft minutes of the December 18th meeting were rewritten to make it appear as if the mini roundabouts had never been rejected. And if any council members have doubts about this bizarre event, we'll be happy to share the video transcripts with you. Now, I would like to depart a little bit from my prepared remarks since we have some new events on the scene. For one thing, I am very gratified that after 2 years of trying to tell the engineering department that these roundabouts would not work, now, finally, under the threat of public exposure, they have come to some kind of an agreement with the fire chief. So if our appeal accomplishes nothing else but that one improvement in public safety, we'll be happy. However, I'm going to ask for more. Now, one of the things you learn when you try to put together a half-hour presentation is hard to get everything in. There was a question raised about the MUTCD. And this goes to the heart of what I think is the general carelessness with which this project has been approached. There was a great deal of concern by the ABR about the median island at Garden and Islay. And the reason for their concern was mainly aesthetic. They were unhappy about the fact that engineering wanted to put a triangular yellow striped area in front of that strip. That is, in essence, required by the MUTCD. That is true. However, it doesn't seem that anybody in Public Works has bothered to actually read the manual. I've gone out and measured that striping. It's 67 feet long. It says very clearly in the MUTCD the minimum length is 100 feet in urban areas. However, that's not the whole story. There's a formula based on the width of the obstruction and the posted speed in the area. Using that formula, the actual minimum length of this yellow painted taper should be 120 feet. In other words, twice as long as what is currently striped. So if the city wants to avoid the liability that could arise if there's an accident, and there already have been some at that location, they have to follow the MUTCD. It's not enough to just say, we're doing it. Someone actually has to read the manual and go out there and see that it's been done. In conclusion, this is no ordinary engineering project. This is a crusade. Apparently, according to staff, nothing, not popular opposition, not safety concerns, nor even the skepticism of experts will be allowed to stand in its way. Only you can stop it. We ask first that you uphold our appeal, if for no other reason than that the ABR process was hopelessly compromised. But we also ask that you recognize that this project never even made it to the first goal of 65% approval. It's time to stop wasting money on this ill-conceived and deceptively promoted plan. Second, we ask that you remind staff that their role with respect to citizen review boards is purely advisory. They are there to answer questions, not to dictate policy. Please also remind them of their duty to be professional, fair, and objective, regardless of their personal feelings about particular projects. We never should have had to bring this appeal before you. Had staff followed procedure, they could have appealed the December 18th decision that they were so unhappy about. Instead, they sought to reverse that decision through backdoor methods. Now, as you know, the filing fee for this appeal is $360. So third, and finally, in the interest of fairness, we ask that you direct the city clerk to refund our money. Please make the check payable to Santa Barbara Safe Streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you done?
We have a short clip, a 2-minute movie to show you of the situation at some of these roundabouts.
You can see how much time you have. Thank you.
3.5, it looks like.
Susan. Susan.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's an accident waiting to happen. Oh no, there's somebody going in front. Oh jeez. Whew. It's Monday, May 14th, 2007, and I'm standing in my driveway and I'm looking at a car that has run into this island in the middle of Garden Street. I'm going to zoom in on this. I was just leaving my driveway when I noticed this car stuck in the middle of this island.
The only roundabout in town that I feel is safe is on Milford Street.
Okay.
And this is not completely safe.
Right.
But this is scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about the one on the APS? Do you know that one?
No, I don't know. Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, I do. That one is the traffic is never a problem on that one to me.
Thank you. Okay, we will now go ahead. Dr. Cooper will be the first speaker. 2 minutes, and let me reset that there. Dr. Cooper, then Rach.
What about the Bungalow Haven?
Well, everybody seemed to think they should just be part of as it goes. And that's okay with me. If you're Dr. Michael Cooper from 1704 Mission Ridge.
That would be me.
I know. Come on up.
So therefore, I've announced who I am. Madam Mayor and Council, in the mid-'90s, I attended a circulation element meeting at the Gebhardt. The topic of the meeting was disincentives to the automobile. The members present were Council members Greg Hart, Gil Garcia, Ellie Langer, and Marty Blum. They were talking about disincentives, how to anger and frustrate the citizens who drive their cars, encouraging them not to drive their cars. And I pose that any council person running for office from now on would be bold enough to tell those constituents whose votes they want to stand up and honestly say, vote for me, and every time you get in your car, I promise you I will do everything in my power to anger and frustrate you. Elections are coming, and this committee is not going to forget these things. That's number one. Point number two, I've asked staff, and I've asked many of you, how much has this project cost? Nobody has come up with a written number. I've heard a verbal from Browning Allen, $900,000. The purpose of this whole adventure was safety and to slow traffic down. I pose one question. How many police officers can you afford for $900,000? And they're all over the city. They're not just in one local neighborhood. The last thing is, there are better ways to use this city's monies and the city's resources. This is a divisive issue.
I urge you to consider what you're going to do tonight, because it's going to come back and be revisited at some point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Roger Manassi will be followed by Adrian Butrich. If you could hold your applause, please, it would help. Adrian Butrich should be right behind Roger Manassi. Roger Manassi first.
Madam Mayor, members of the...
Yeah, if you could, well, you're right there. Never mind. Go ahead. Sorry.
Can you hear me? Madam Mayor, members of the council, I have a statement I wish to read. As a long-term resident of Santa Barbara, I have been able to observe many of the changes in our roadway infrastructure and the impact of these changes on congestion, traffic congestion, and safety. In 1989, I voted for Measure D in the hope that it would lead to improved traffic flow and widening of our freeway. However, we have witnessed a number of changes which are ineffective, counterproductive, or worse. For example, the narrowing of Shoreline Drive, a hazard for the flow of emergency traffic, traffic calmers in many locations throughout the city, some of them posing a serious hazard, Stanley Drive, the narrowing of Lower Ontario Road, a traffic hazard, installation of roundabouts where there is inadequate room, a hazard, the elimination of the free right turn lane from Cliff Drive onto Las Positas Road, and the list goes on. Now it appears that we are faced with more of the same, more traffic calmers, more roundabouts, more street narrowing, bulb outs at intersections, all of which impede the flow of traffic and increase traffic congestion. The Upper State Street plan calls for raised medians along much of Upper State Street, which will preclude mid-block left turns and require many more U-turns at intersections, longer wait times at red lights, and more traffic congestion.
Could you wind up, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Also in the works is the elimination of the free right turn lane on State Street to De La Vina, leading to more traffic congestion. All of these changes at taxpayer expense.
Okay, thank you
None
very
of us
much.
wants to see more auto traffic in our city, but I would much prefer traffic that flows than traffic jams that waste time and contribute to air pollution.
People on my left and right want me to tell you that you're past 2 minutes
Thank you.
already. It's one of those things. Adrian Butash will be followed by Kellum DeForest.
I'm Adrian Butash, Madam Mayor and council members. You remember the horror film Nightmare on Elm Street, where Freddy Krueger terrorized the neighborhood? Well, there's a horror show right in town here, and I call it Nightmare on Garden Street. Technology. I have 4 slides. I'll do 25 seconds each. Thank you. This is ugly, unsafe, unlawful, and unnecessary. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I've forbidden her to ride on Sola or Garden in the area of any of these roundabouts. Next. This looks like the flight deck of the nuclear-powered Nimitz aircraft carrier. And at 30 miles an hour, the amount of time to absorb all this information is incredible. You'll notice, as is pointed out before on these bulb outs, these are not mere parking marks. These are high-speed impact collision marks. Next. I took these photographs yesterday. These are cars whizzing through Sola and Olive. You'll notice there's not one brake light on. These cars do not brake. I spend 5 minutes here. There's enough evidence here. If you spend 5 hours, 99% of the pictures will be the same. These cars are averaging, at my estimation, about 30 miles an hour. Next. Thank you. You'll notice in the shot on the left, the car is going right down the bike lane, and you notice the bikers on the right who are following immediately behind this car going 30 miles an hour, so you have convergent traffic of automotive, bikers, and in the state of confusion, the woman on the right was really at danger, in my opinion. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Kellen DeForest will be followed by Katie Hatch. Is Katie Hatch here? Do you want to come up to the front and wait, please, right there? Thank you. Mr. DeForest.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Kellen DeForest. I know I've spoken often at your meetings and at other commission and board meetings. You probably think of me as a pest. This time, I am not speaking for myself alone, but am here as designated by the Pearl Chase Society and as chairman of its preservation committee, representing its almost 400 members, to read into the record a letter from the society authorized by the board. The society does not authorize a letter without fully investigating an issue, determining that it falls within the mission of the society, and most importantly, hearing both sides. Here is the Pearl Chase Society's letter for your consideration, with the hope that you will respect the historical heritage of Santa Barbara street grid in upholding this appeal. And here is the letter to Mayor Bloom and members of the City Council. At the April 11th, 1906 meeting, April 11th, 2006 meeting of the City Council, arguments were heard regarding permanent traffic calming devices to be placed at various intersections and streets on the Upper East Side. The arguments in regard to these devices was persuasive. The Pearl Chase Society, whose mission is the preservation of Santa Barbara's historic character, asked that the historic feel and ambience of this neighborhood be retained. In approving these devices, you insisted that their design be approved by the Architectural Board of Review to ensure that the devices would fit into the historic neighborhood. On October 5th, 2006, Mr. Tully Clifford spoke to the board of the Pearl Chase Society and assured us that the devices would fit into the streetscape through the use of sandstone curbing and appropriate plant material. When the plans were finally presented to the ABR, it was apparent that the devices did not fit into the streetscape, and the bulb outs, islands, and mini roundabouts with the requisite concrete and obtrusive signage would mar the feel of the Upper East Side.
Thank you.
So that is, and you have the rest of that letter in front of you, and I do hope you will take that to heart. Thank you very much.
Okay, did we get copies of that? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Katie Hatch will be followed by Grant Castleberg.
Okay, I'm just going to say a couple of things. I've been a resident here since the first day I was born. I'll let my father, Grant Castleberg, talk about the design aspects if he so chooses, because he is much more able. I've emailed all of you about this over the last few years. I hear a lot of things going on that are different than the replies I'm getting in emails, so I feel like there is some sort of something going on in public versus in emails. I'm not going to bring it all out, but I'm not quite sure what the agenda is or whose agenda is what, but regardless, I'll just say a few things. One, we're talking about form and function. I think form follows function as a design rule, and we shouldn't even, I appreciate Kellen DeForest's form discussion, but we haven't even gotten the function down. We really need to discuss that. I think liability is just the biggest issue right now. I think the city should be placed, and I personally place them on notice. I've almost been in an accident in front of my parents' house, which is at Garden Islay, 15 times from that atrocious thing in the middle of the road. And I think the city's liable for anything that you guys do. And I think also, I'm not quite sure, the ABR says they talk about aesthetics, not mechanics. Who is liable for the mechanics of it, if not ABR, if not the traffic department? Thank you.
Thank you. Grant Castleberg will be followed by John DeVore. John, if you'd sit up. Yeah, thanks.
Madam Mayor, members
Yes.
of the council, my name is Grant Castleberg, and I won't repeat all the things I think that were said very well by the Safe Streets Santa Barbara. But I live, as Katie said, just below the thing at Garden and Islay, and I feel it's unsafe to go out my driveway now because a car coming down, going around that thing, is headed straight for me. And larger vehicles, fire engines, buses, and pickups don't go around it. They drive right over it. There's no hope for landscaping to beautify it. And other vehicles find it a challenge to see how fast they can go around it. Traffic has not slowed down there at all. And as to the ballots, I did not receive one. I'm wondering, am I the only one or others that didn't receive
You
it?
need to address the council. Thank you.
I think that needs to be asked, though. And I realize that this is kind of a blackmail by the bungalow district as an appeasement for the approval of a cottage hospital, which is another sore point and very unpopular, and I think should not have been approved. Thank you.
Thank you. John DeVore will be followed by by Jill Kent.
Mayor Bloom and council members, I think I'm going to say something different this evening. My wife and I support the city's traffic calming efforts. We think they are effective, and some of them, chicanes and circles, are attractive assets. We live on Stanley Drive. Nearly a decade ago, the city installed chicanes in a circle on our street. They immediately had the desired effect, demonstrably and measurably slowing traffic. In fact, not only was the average speed slowed by about 5 miles per hour, but the fastest cars were slowed even more. Chicanes and circle are landscaped and much more attractive than parked cars, which have much the same effect, but are less attractive and more dangerous by virtue of completely blocking driver views. We note that calming devices are used successfully elsewhere, for instance in Berkeley, which we recently had occasion to visit. We find the new circle at the east entrance to UCSB a great improvement over the traffic light which it replaced. So we want to thank you for your efforts in making our city a safer place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill Kent will be followed by Mary Moore.
Madam Mayor, I just want to say, I think the mayor is being extremely patient with violations of decorum today. You do not clap, boo, talk while someone is talking. There is a formal decorum here that befits a city council and befits our duty that we are supposed to dispense on your behalf. And I really would ask that from the audience.
Thank you. And if you really can't control yourself and you want to watch it, the room right behind us has a TV and you can watch it in there. I'm sorry. Jill Kent will be followed by Mary Moore. Jill.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, I'm here this evening. I have submitted a petition signed by myself and my immediate neighbors. I live on Grand, and I spoke to just my immediate neighborhood of Grand and Mitchell Terrena and Alta Vista and Jimeno. And all of my neighbors, without exception, were, of course, adamant about signing the petition to remove the traffic calmers. Comments that my neighbors immediately gave me where I've called and complained numerous times to no avail. These things are ridiculous and dangerous, especially at Alta Vista and Sola. People hesitate because they're not sure what they should do. The cars cannot see me when I'm trying to cross the street. I don't drive around them. I have changed streets I drive on just to avoid them. Again, if the object is to slow down, then why can't we use stop signs? People understand stop signs. Well, that's exactly what was ultimately installed at the intersection of Olive and Valerio, and of course in front of Santa Barbara High School, where the maximum concentration of student cars created havoc. How about fixing some of the streets, especially Alta Vista, with the money? Maybe these precisely engineered drawings look good on paper, but they don't work in our neighborhood, where the streets are so narrow that you can barely pass a car driving the other direction when there are cars parked on the side of the street. We do not live in a big city neighborhood. Traffic in this neighborhood has not increased. We are angry, and we have never received any information concerning these to object to them initially. I speak for myself and my neighbors in requesting that you deny. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Moore will be followed by George Behar. I
live at Casa Riviera condominiums off of APS,
and I do not think that we were sent any letter asking what we thought about this, but people who live on the Riviera are affected too, because we all have to go down through Upper East in order to get downtown or come back home. And several weeks ago, I accidentally ran over one of those bulb outs because I didn't see it in time to swerve, and it caused my car to swerve into the left lane, and that's not what would be good. Fortunately, there were no pedestrians or other cars coming, but I feel like it could have caused an accident if there had been. Thank you.
Thank you. George Bajer, followed by Ralph Fertig.
I'm one of the previous speaker's neighbors, and like her, I was not surveyed as to my opinion about these roundabouts, but I use them all the time. And I find them very dangerous because most people do not understand that the automobile that's already in the roundabout has the right of way, and you try to make a left turn, you're bound to be hit by a car coming in the opposite direction, which does not expect you to make the left turn. In a large roundabout, it makes sense. In a small roundabout, I think this is extremely dangerous. And there are much better ways to do it. You can do stop signs. You can do yield signs in the streets with the lesser traffic. You can even put speed bumps if necessary, but I think these mini roundabouts are extremely dangerous, especially if you're going to try to make a left turn.
Thank you. Ralph Fertig will be followed by John Olson.
Mayor Bloom and members of the City Council, I'm sure that you get messages from residents all the time. I can't help but wonder how many people phone you saying that motorists go too slowly past their home. Isn't there something you can do to speed them up? How many parents email you saying that their kids are too safe walking across the street to school? Can't more traffic be diverted for them to dodge as they run across the street? Do you get letters from residents complaining that it's too quiet in their neighborhood, asking you for more squealing racing cars to fix the problem? We know these requests don't exist, yet some motorists would like you to believe that they do. I attended many of the St. Francis and Oak Park community meetings, not because I live in those areas, but because I'm concerned with our Santa Barbara quality of life and wanted to hear what residents had to say. One after another described scary intersections, near misses, speeding traffic. Nobody complained about too many pedestrians on the sidewalks, or too many mothers with strollers going to the park, or too many bicyclists on the streets. All the complaints were about motorized traffic. Nationally, we have 43,000 annual traffic-related deaths and 2.7 million injuries. These tragic numbers are often viewed as the inevitable byproduct of driving in Santa Barbara and elsewhere, but they don't have to be. A study by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety determined that intersection conversion to roundabouts reduces injuries by 76% and fatalities by 90%. The same study reports that 41% of motorists strongly oppose roundabouts before construction, but that opposition drops to 14% afterwards. There's a lesson for us all. Don't get mad. Just wait until final construction takes place. Give safety a chance, and we'll know how traffic calming improves our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Olson will be followed by Andy Young. Whoever's doing that needs to go in the other room. Yes.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm a pretty moderate person, and I just think that you need a definition on what a roundabout is. I was recently in Australia. They work great. 40 miles an hour, but they got a 200-foot radius. You are not developing roundabouts and by putting a stick in the middle of an intersection. Everybody that comes by says this is total folly. And flower beds even worse. Look at the rubber marks on there. Every one of those blown tires had to go to the nearest gas station. It's folly, and it's government at its worst. The staff is going goofy here. You're the politicians. Take care of business. Support this appeal. And, I plead with you to have some reasonableness to this. The stick in the middle of the intersection is total folly. Thank you.
Andy Young will be followed by David Woodford.
Good evening. I support the traffic calming plan the city has been attempting to implement. I recommend denying the appeal of the ABR approval. I've lived at the corner of Islay and Laguna for approximately 5 years. I'm a member of the Upper East Side Neighborhood Association. I've been involved in this particular traffic calming effort for many years, including going door to door to collect signatures. When I drive to work, I go through the Garden and Islay intersection I'm very familiar with the current traffic island that's been installed there for quite some time. I could choose to go a different route to avoid it, but I don't. I prefer to go through that intersection. When I don't drive, I'm lucky enough to be able to walk or ride my bike to work. I'm very interested in having Santa Barbara be a safe place for all residents, including pedestrians and bicyclists. I walk 3 or 4 days a week at lunchtime, and I use the West Quinto Street De La Vina intersection. I'm very happy with the curb extensions that were recently installed there. It makes it much easier to cross this busy street now. As for the fire department, if they sign off on the plan, that's good enough for me. They're the most qualified to make the determination. Please continue moving forward with the traffic calming plan. Hopefully something will be done before my Roosevelt kids are in college. Thank you.
Thank you. David Woodford will be followed by Richard Moss. Okay, is that Mr. Woodford? Yes. Thank you. Richard Moss will be followed by Russell Palmer.
Yeah, Richard Moss, 212 Mission Street. I think one of the lessons that I've learned from this is that I looked on the web and I saw that San Luis Obispo has a very good program that involves citizens in any kind of things like this. They set up committees and the citizens are involved and they end up helping to make the final decision. And I think one thing I noticed, there's a lot of dissent here. And this is not good for the council or good for the people that live here. I've lived here for 20 years. I would like to encourage citizen involvement in any projects that are going on so we can end up with a workable project that people support.
Thank you. Russell Palmer be followed by Joseph Rushan.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is Russell Palmer. I live up on Gibraltar Road. I have witnessed many, many times when a little bit of some sort of emergency situation happens, everybody panics and everybody tries to get out at once. We only have a couple, with the closure of 144, we only have a couple of ways out, a couple of emergency egress routes, and depending on when a raging fire is coming up the hill, we may only have one. I'd like to draw your attention to a roundabout that was just painted onto the street where Mission Ridge meets Mountain. It's turned it into a three-way intersection with a roundabout that is from as big as from me to that wall. It's incredibly dangerous. It's much worse than it used to be. The engine, and I would ask you to come up and look at it. You will realize that the people who are designing these things are wholly incompetent. When you realize what we are faced with up in everybody behind the Riviera is faced with in an evacuation of a fire, you'll realize that hundreds of people could be trapped in their cars trying to pull over and get out of the way of the fire trucks coming up the hill. And depending on the rage of the winds and the fire, hundreds of people could be fried in their cars because there's no way out. This situation is not helping us. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Rushan, followed by Rich Unterman. Sorry.
Hi, I'm representing Bungalow Haven, a neighborhood association. I'm representing a number of people who support this thing who aren't here today because we didn't think we should prepare to argue the merits of this thing because we argued the merits of this thing about a half a dozen times before, and we decided not to try to pack this room. This was a very impressive presentation. The world is coming to an end. We're the people that live in the midst of these things, and they've been there for a couple of years, and the world hasn't come to an end. I live there, I bike, I walk, I drive, and somehow I missed all these horrors. Our gentleman talked about neighborhood organization support. Last meeting of our neighborhood organization affected by this project voted to reaffirm our support for this thing that was originally established by the most democratic process we could figure of doing it, was to educate everybody in the neighborhood about this project, notify everybody of a vote in the neighborhood directly upon this thing, and invite everybody to come and participate. At that time, the support was overwhelming for the thing. I suggest we get these things. They look like hell now. Let's get them built, prettied up, and these things are exactly like many that work very well in exactly like ones that work in many other cities. I suggest that if we get these things fixed, people get used to them, people respect them, and I'll bet you that within a year, people from other neighborhoods will be coming here asking to get these in their neighborhoods too.
Thank you. Rich Hunderman will be followed by Johnny Jamison. And your daughter writes a very nice letter to the editor, by the way. Was that your daughter?
No, it isn't. I have
It
a
wasn't,
son.
okay.
But I'll
Somebody
take credit
named
for
Richard-
it.
named Underman. but she-
Yeah, as long as I
Go ahead
spell the
and take
name
credit.
right, you know, it works out fine.
Okay, but it was a nice letter.
Yeah, oh,
Whoever
good.
she is.
Okay,
Go ahead.
well, I'll have to try and get it. Thanks for letting me talk. I own a business just at the edge of this, and my people, my guests, love to walk. And you notice on the little form, I didn't know whether I should support or not the proposal. I think traffic calming is very important. I think street design is very important, and that it's critical as we move from gas guzzlers to smaller cars to walking to biking, etc., that we continue to support experiments and new ideas and copying old ideas as we reshape our city. So on this one, you know, it's been around just about as long as the widening issue on the 101, and that's clearly too long for a couple of bumps in a road. And I think that's one of the real problems. You've got to get these things in and out before people lose patience on it and get angry like has happened. There's more compromises ever been that I've seen in the projects, and that's probably a problem on this. I have two observations on traffic calming. One is it works best and easiest on large streets and on one-way streets. You've got plenty of room, there's room for everything to maneuver, and spend as much money as you can there to make it easy for the pedestrians to cross and to slow down traffic. These are not large streets. This is a tangle. It's kind of like steel wool up there, and it's really complicated. Everybody's got their opinions, and I think, for one thing, the bump outs are better than the circles on small neighborhoods because they really help the pedestrian. If you look at the way the pedestrian crosses the street when there's a circle, they're forced way back into the neighborhood, and they're beyond the point where cars normally stop. If you do a bump out, you can tell me to stop when you want, because...
Oh, I just looked, 10
okay.
seconds.
10 seconds,
You can
okay,
see it
yeah.
up there.
So I do bump outs. In the tangled neighborhoods, the first thing I do is I eliminate all those red paint at the intersections. Okay. You know, you have 50 or 60 feet of red paint. Now you try to fill it up with a circle to slow traffic down. If you allow cars to park closer to the intersection, they would be the traffic calming device.
Okay, thank you. John Jamison, followed by John Jamison.
My name is John Jamison, Madam Mayor, City Council. I'm in favour of the mini roundabouts at the corner of Valerio and Garden, where I live. A mini roundabout is nothing more than a four-way rolling stop, and that's the Santa Barbara specialty. 90% of the cars coming there never stop; they just roll gently through. And that's if you put a sign in the middle. If you put a sign in the middle and said roundabout, they would be happy. But since there's no sign there, the people are very upset. But roundabouts with bulb outs and choking don't work. It's not a calming device, a roundabout, it's a traffic flow device. And to that extent, they do work. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan Jamison will be followed by Susan Bauer.
I'd just like to say a word about the traffic calmer, and especially the one on Garden and Islay. It's kind of to punctuate what has already been said, but living close to it, I see it all the time. Walking by there every day, I see it all the time. The bulb outs force bicyclists into the traffic lane. The device in the middle of the road is an obstruction, certainly not a calmer. It looks extremely unsightly. And so just to add my piece, being very, very acquainted with it, it's something that really should go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Susan Bauer will be followed by Mark Bradley. Ms. Bauer?
Is this the mic?
Yes.
My name is Susan Bauer. Good evening, Mayor Marty Bloom and City Council, Dallas and Helene. I live on the corner of Garden and Los Olivos and go by the intersection of Garden and Isley all the time. And as others have spoken and commented about this particular calming device, it is so ineffective. It is so terribly ineffective. Cars don't slow down. They absolutely don't slow down. It's like going around in Le Mans. You know, they're doing a racetrack thing. In view of everything that everyone has said here tonight, I don't see how, in the name of heaven, you could vote this issue in and have these calming devices be around. The citizenry has spoken. You've listened to them very carefully and very cautiously. And my last remark would be, these things are just butt ugly, and they need to go.
Whoops, be careful. Mark Bradley to be followed by George Glarum. Try to keep it clean around here.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Bradley.
Mayor.
Keep your language clean, Mr. Bradley.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Mark Bradley. Your predecessors who put traffic calming into the city general plan and the circulation element, and you yourselves who approved the same project last year over most of these same objections, did so for very good reasons. Some people will always oppose policies like this. Some will always approve of them. But no one, or hardly anyone in Santa Barbara, has really seen yet a well-designed, effective traffic calming program. And it's unfortunate that the first instance of these devices in Santa Barbara was carried out with these temporary installations. I've seen traffic calming mini roundabouts in a lot of cities that work well, and they don't really look much like the ones we have here so far, and they work better. So I'm assuming that what a lot of people here are objecting to tonight is just what the ABR decision is going to replace when we put in permanent traffic calming devices that work well and look good. These types of measures and programs are very successful in other cities. In Seattle, they've put them in mini roundabouts in over 800 intersections. They get 700 new requests per year. They did some statistics of some intersections. The year before they put them in, there were 187 accidents. The year after, there were 11 accidents. That's a 94% decrease. The number of injuries in those accidents went from 153 down to one injury. And they did surveys of the residents afterwards, and there were 80 to 90% approval. And they allow people to have them removed with a petition, and that's only happened twice out of the over 800 cases. And just to remind you of some support here in Santa Barbara, when they did the Measure D survey,
wind up, please.
Did the Measure D survey 2 years ago, 73% of the people said you should spend some of the money on traffic calming, and that's even more than said that you should widen 101. So thank you.
Right. George Glarum will be followed by Judy McKee.
Madam Mayor and City Council, I'm glad to be here, and I have an opinion. Good. I watched there, and I wondered, why is the opposition? And I think I know why. They work. They're an inconvenience. They slow traffic down. As far as a lot of statements have been made about safety, I think you can find out from police records, and I'd be willing to bet anybody here, you slow traffic down, you're going to have fewer accidents and fewer injuries. As far as the nightmare on Garden Street, I live 100 yards down from that device, and it's a godsend on Garden Street as far as I'm concerned. I can get out of my traffic now because I can look up, and when I see the traffic come around the device, I know I've got a certain amount of time. Before, the traffic was going down 40, 45, and then come to a screeching halt. We don't hear those signs, those sounds, at Garden Street and Valeria that we used to hear of screeching brakes and breaking glass and busted up vehicles. Now, I've been around a while. I've been here since 1948. I came here at 8 years old, and I walked to Roosevelt School. I walked to Santa Barbara Junior High. I walked and rode my bike to Santa Barbara High School. I know the area, and I drive the area, and the yield signs are what people normally do anyway. They don't stop if they don't have to, but they see the yield, they slow down, and I think that makes it easier to walk and ride your bike. Aesthetics, that's a point they may have, and I'm sure the council can take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy McKee will be followed by Ray Appleton. Mr. Appleton, if you can come up to the front, please.
I'd like to say first that I'm also a member of Bungalow Haven, and the vote that was taken was not a poll of the entire group, but those who attended one solitary meeting. And I'm definitely against this project. I attended the many meetings at St. Francis, but they suddenly morphed into a slick meeting at Trinity, complete with slides, in which a traffic calming program was presented, already in place. Examples from various cities were presented. At this time, I realized that this was not a grassroots project, and I really resented that this thing was being laid upon my city. It seems to me, though, that there's too much of a focus on cars, and this is blinding us to what I hope is the aim of traffic calming, to make our streets safer for everyone. However, there is no way to safely bike or to cross a street in the face of oncoming cars. Drivers have to pay more attention to maneuvering these annoying clumps than paying attention to who's crossing the street or who might be riding a bike coming up behind you. Regarding the lowering of accidents that was just mentioned, perhaps that's because people no longer cared to travel these streets anymore because they were such a nuisance. So that's one way of lowering accidents. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray Appleton will be followed by Scott Wenz. Mr. Wenz, if you'd come up. Thanks.
My name is Raymond Appleton. I'm a long-term resident of Santa Barbara. I live up in the area where the roundabouts have been going in, up on Olive Avenue. And my wife and I travel all of the streets up and down through the entire roundabout area, getting from our home down into the city. And we are strongly in favor of the roundabout method. It has greatly reduced the speed of automobiles. It has not reduced the speed of the bicycles that come screaming down through the stop signs. I wish there was still something we could do about that, but the automobiles have been slowed down. We live just up a little higher, just a little above Olive Avenue, and so the sound carries pretty heavy up there, especially at night, and it's a lot quieter. People aren't having to stop and start through the roundabout areas, and that's nice. The roundabout was removed from the closest intersection to us at Olive and Valerio. I don't know, perhaps it was just designated to wait until he got a better design, but they did put in four-way stop sign. Now, that is better than what was there before. Any intersection that has one side stopping and the other side not stopping is just set for disaster, because at some point someone thinks that the other person is going to stop, and that's, I've been hit nearly twice at that same intersection. Now the four-way stop is better, but I wish that the roundabout had been installed so that the noise of stopping and starting, and believe it or not, the added just automotive exhaust and congestion that comes from a car every time it has to start and stop. So we just want to say that we're very much in favor of it. We think I do agree with one of the spokesmen that I just wish that perhaps you'd just chosen a few, designed them correctly with the sandstone, little roundabout, low roundabout, and installed those to start with, and then brought in the others after they were better designed. Yeah. I think you took a broad shotgun approach at it, and a few of them have, in their premature design attempt, well, you hear what's happened. Okay. But I do hope that you continue the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Wenz will be followed by Robert Maxim.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wenz representing Cars Are Basic. I have a position statement here and then a comment. The following facts support traffic hazard removal and return of the streets to the normal area. Cars Are Basic supports the appeal. The majority of residents do not want them, that's clear. This is despite a promotional campaign conducted by the city over 2 years to sell the plan to the public. The city spent tens of thousands of dollars and hired out-of-town consultants. Core groups were selected by staff. The core groups were composed of vocal anti-car advocates. The minority was said to represent the public. After 2.5 years of expensive promotion consultants and 2 ballots, the vote was 304, approximately 304, and over 1,000 calls against that the city admitted to getting after they were put in place. In just 16 hours, Streets Are Us, the PAC for Cars Are Basic, collected 300 signatures against it. 16 hours versus 2.5 years of promotion by the city. Safe routes to school, state money grants are part of the plan. To obtain the money, a traffic staff member stated that the school district was in favor of the plan. The statement is false. The school district personnel emails state that they were not informed of any details of the plan, which include bulb outs and roundabouts. That's been public record. That's already been presented twice to this council. For 7 years, CAB asked for statistical evidence that calming devices increase street safety, since the traffic division had been telling the council and residents of this fact. The traffic division has not been able to produce any data supporting their claims. Meanwhile, CAB has presented official statistics to prove the opposite, that they are not beneficial and do not reduce accidents. By the way, staff presented a speed study in this area and found that traffic was traveling at or below the speed limit on all streets. Safe Streets has evidence that public safety officials say the plan interferes with emergency response and evacuation plans. On February 2007, city staff stated at a TCC meeting that it cannot give the public exact estimates of cost of the plan. Okay. Due to the lack of statistical evidence to support the St. Francis plan, the increased risk to the public poses to the public, the heightened liability it gives the public, and the overwhelming public opposition, please take them out. Do not allow this appeal to go unheard. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Maxim will be followed by Bonnie Donovan. Is Bonnie here? Oh, right there.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and fellow council members. I'm Robert Maxim, and I'm here on behalf of myself and my wife, Patricia. I'm not going to reiterate the arguments made so very well, the positions taken indisputably by the appellants. We are in total support of this position. And please note, and I do want everyone in this room to remember, the appellants are not against the slowing down of traffic. They're not against safety. They're against these particular devices. As an example, just last Sunday there was a special historic homes tour. My wife and I attended it, and we were walking down Garden Street to go to one of the homes. We don't live in that neighborhood, but we do frequent it, obviously, since we live in the city. And my wife, Pat, who doesn't usually notice these things but does not like these traffic calmers, indeed said, "Oh, Robert, look, there's that traffic calmer. It was at the middle of the small one at Islay and Garden. No one's slowing down as they approach it, and this is Sunday afternoon, not even a work day. There wasn't a red light flashed on the back tail lights. We left the home after the tour, and we're approaching the same intersection for about a block, and we actually noticed that not only did they not stop, but a young person in a pickup truck actually accelerated as he approached the intersection, we presumed thinking it was like a challenge of a slalom run. This is what a traffic calming doesn't do. I don't know why we're all here. The answer is a 4-way stop sign. They are inexpensive. They are attractive. People don't have to get used to them. They know exactly what to do when they come into a stop sign. Also, there's no maintenance. They're easy to put back in place if they do get harmed. There's no water consumption. There's no design problem. ABR has already said they can't be made to look nice. They fit well historically. They've been around for more than 100 years, and they work. Thank you.
Bonnie Donovan will be followed by Betsy Ingalls.
First of all, the stats they're giving you is for roundabouts, and a roundabout is at Milpas Street, and all natives know we used to wait 4 signal lights to get through that. The reason we put it in there is to make the traffic move. These are not roundabouts that you're putting in. They're obstacles in the middle of the road, and you're not supposed to have obstacles in the roads. And I sat there Saturday and stood on the curb, put my camera right on the middle of the curb, and just took pictures as cars was passing me, and they're like right next to you. And this is supposed to be safe routes to schools. We lost a kid in a bike lane. The guy has his view is all obstructed from the sun in his eyes. I leave church there, and half the time in the year, there's a glare on Garden Street, and you can't see coming down it. And somebody's going to get hit, and somebody's going to be killed. A car already went in the middle of it. And if you haven't gone to see that, there's a big old gouge out of it where he was sitting. And there's a lot more I have to say, and I'd love to take your video to the news or home videos.
Thank you, Betsy Ingles, followed by Susan McLaughlin, and then the last speaker will be Karen Cooper.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, my name is Betsy Ingles. I live on Jimeno. I travel where all the bump outs and the round obstructions are on the streets. And I please ask you to use your better judgment and vote down all of these obstacles that are in the streets. I was never asked if I like them or not, and certainly I'm in the neighborhood. And I really can tell you that since I've moved to Santa Barbara and been to several of the meetings on St. Francis and now there's roundabouts, I really don't get the sense that you guys are accountable to me or my neighbors or any of the citizens. I don't know to what authority you listen to, but you're not listening to us. And I really want you to start listening and hearing what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan McLaughlin, and the last speaker will be Karen Cooper.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Susan McLaughlin, and I am not a traffic engineer. And I just kind of wish that the previous speakers, or at least some of them that actually applied to, would say that in the beginning of their comments, because it's important, because we trust engineers that have these skills and the education to back them, to actually create final working drawings on these traffic calming measures. I am a land use planner, and I managed the the Oak Park NTMP with the help of Rob Dayton and Browning Allen when I was on city staff a couple of years ago. And it was a great experience. I just want to commend council for adopting that pilot program at St. Francis and really taking the challenge on to put the power to the people to create a concept that would improve the walkability and the pedestrian nature of their own neighborhood. Now, that's not to say that they're going to approve the engineered drawings and that they're going to actually be able to participate in those levels of discussion that are a lot more detailed than the concept of improving the walkability and pedestrian nature of your environment in your own neighborhood. So I just want to say that, again, I commend council, I commend staff for their patience, diligence, meticulous nature to details on both these NTMPs. And yeah, it was an honor to be a part. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Last speaker will be Karen Cooper.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Karen Cooper, and I live on Pedregosa between Garden and Laguna. And I really am against this roundabout that is at Islay and Garden, where I travel and walk. And I feel it's a waste of money. And I would like to make a suggestion that speed bumps would be safer and cheaper. And I don't think that our small streets in Santa Barbara are they're too small for roundabouts. When you have big boulevards or that kind of a city, then a roundabout works. And I never got a ballot. I never voted on this, and I was just going to ask if we could have a vote, a city vote on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no more speakers. Let me just, there. Whoops. There. Okay. Is there anything that staff wants to add, or you're doing okay over there? Nothing particular to add. Okay. Just to let folks know, a couple people, not too many of you though, mentioned speed bumps. We did a bunch of speed bumps. We did some on Valerio, some around Peabody School, some over by the municipal golf course. And frankly, and some of them have worn down so that you can really travel almost the same as you used to travel. I rode on some speed bumps in a big hook and ladder truck, and I can understand why the fire department is not thrilled with speed bumps. Really hard to hit a speed bump in a big hook and ladder. So we are trying to avoid those, although we have some of them around town. They do seem to slow people down until they get graded down a bit, but speed bumps are just not an option for us right now. Our fire department doesn't like them. Okay, to the council, please. Ms. Falcone.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. You had asked staff if they could have a comment. Could I just have one brief second to comment? The statistics that Ralph Fertig and the others referred to about roundabouts are true, but these aren't roundabouts. These are mini circles. So roundabouts are large, big things. Those statistics that he quoted do not count for what we have in this traffic calming program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Okay, Ms. Falcone.
Well, I'll kick it off here because I know I'm going to be in the minority, or at least I think I am. First, let me say that that I'm a fan of roundabouts. I think that the one at Milpas Street is a great success. I do not consider it at all the circle of death or something that it was called at one point. I think it's a tremendous asset. It's working brilliantly. I've driven all over the place with roundabouts in many cities and countries, actually, and I understand the benefits of them. However, truth be told, and I'm going to apologize to staff, I never liked these. I never thought they were really going to work. And I'm not just saying that because I'm up for re-election, because I'm not. That being said, I did agree to go along with putting some of these in. I mean, there's a plan for many, many more. But the suggestion was made that we put some of them in and see how they work. I did this because every expert that I respect, who is an expert in their field, said that these are a good thing. But seeing them on the ground, and I know they're not finished, and I complain a little bit when people say that the buildings on Chapala Street, look awful and they're too big and so forth, and my response is, please wait till they're finished and let's then have a conversation about it. So I thought maybe we could wait until some of these were finished. But I agree with the Pearl Chase Society. I think that these devices do violence to the historic neighborhood. They're garish, and I agree with you, they are ugly. We need safe streets, and we need safe neighborhoods. I'm just not sure that this is the way to go about it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose on this sentiment, and if that's the case, we really need to do these the right way, and I'm not quite sure what that is. I don't think it's what's on the ground now. So I think some retooling and rethinking needs to be done if we go forward with this. I would be perfectly happy to see them come out, quite frankly. I'm curious, though, why there's an island at Garden and Islay as opposed to a roundabout, because that's the one place where the street is wide enough that a roundabout actually might be able to work. The little circles with the bulb outs, I find them, yes, they slow people down, but they confuse. And I know there's a sentiment of people need to get used to them, but these are peculiar. I mean, there's just a completely peculiar nature about these things. And the island, I drove over there the other day, coming from Islay, turning right on Garden Street, and as I was approaching the intersection, I kept looking for a roundabout, knowing what they look like. I was looking for the roundabout. I couldn't find it. I got to the intersection, I sort of looked around, and then this yellow thing popped out at me, quite scared me, quite frankly, and I didn't quite know what to do at that point. I turned right, but at that point I had backed people up down Garden Street. So if that happens on a regular basis to folks, I know getting used to things is half the battle, but there's got to be a better way to do this. And next time I will know that the island is there. But they are pretty garish and awful. So that's my opinion for what it's worth.
Okay, Mr. Williams?
Well, I feel that just that if one or even a couple of these don't work, that does not necessarily mean that we should uphold this appeal. That is not necessarily appropriate for a couple reasons. Number one is you appeal on a set of criteria. None of those criteria, in my estimation, have been met. Most of you have some very good points, and I think that Mr. Francisco is right that even if what you accomplish tonight is even just causing staff to have to reevaluate some things and negotiate with the fire department and get rid of a couple of bulb outs that maybe didn't work, I actually think that's productive. I think that some of you did have good points. I feel that some of those are taken to an extreme, and I can't disagree with roundabouts from an ideological perspective or a broad swath. Sometimes these devices work, and sometimes they don't. And we can and should make adjustments when they're defective, but an inconvenience is not always the end of the world. As Mr. DeVore noted, Stanley Drive is an inconvenience to me personally when I drive through there trying to get to Las Positas. But to the people that live there, they're a godsend, and I don't want to take that away from them. I know because I've been very close to the Bungalow Haven neighborhood for some time that at least when I walk the neighborhood, a vast majority of folks do support these devices, though not uniformly. Some have said there's a couple that don't work very well. My advice to those that see those issues, deal with the design of each of these intersections separately instead of trying to get the council to ideologically say no to roundabouts as a policy for the whole city. I'm not going to go for it because I think that there's places that it's appropriate, and I think we should deny the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Burnwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, in many ways, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Williams. I can't support the appeal because the appeal is on specific grounds that have to do with the ABR, and the ABR did what we asked it to do. It came up with these design elements. The arguments that we've been listening to tonight really don't relate quite so much to the design elements as they do to the fact of the matter that these things exist. I have to confess, I have never liked them either. But like Ms. Falcone, I was deferring to the experts. Mr. Horton and the mayor and I sit on a subcommittee of the council that looks at transportation issues. And I believe I'm correct that there were supposed to be 23 of these installed, something like that. And we said, no way. No way are you going to do 23. At that point, they had 7 of them in, and we said, stop right there. Try and make those 7 work. Convince us all that this is a workable program. We don't want any more than that. That's how we find ourselves here right now. I agree with Mr. Williams. I think there's a couple of them in this set of 7 that I think ought to be taken out. My dear wife doesn't like them. She said she was going to watch this thing tonight just to see what conclusion we came to convince her that these things belong.
Guess you're in the doghouse.
So, and I share that. The other part of me, having been a builder and associated with the history of the city, is I find them visually offensive, and they're full of clutter. My own experiences with them have not been smooth and creamy. They've been abrupt, confusing. My mind has to go into some little special category of what the heck am I driving into when I approach them. The Marburg truck, I don't know what was going on with the Marburg truck, but if that happens one time, we need to rethink that intersection. I don't want that guy out there backing up the Marburg truck to conduct his turns. So, insofar as the item that's right in front of us now, which is do we support the appeal of the ABR's decision, or do we deny the appeal? I have to say that I deny the appeal. However, I am in favor of looking at the 7 that we have and seriously deciding if we need those 7. And if there are 2 or 3 of those 7 that we think have the potential to work, I would far prefer that we limit this 7 down, get rid of the 2 or 3 most contentious and offensive, and take them out. Just take them out. I'm not convinced that they fit where they're at. I won't go into the details of, but there's a couple or 3 of them that I just don't like them. And they've been there for 2 years. I don't need another 2 years to figure out I don't like them. I've already come to the conclusion of driving through them that they're not working. And I like the idea that they may get designed well, sandstone and flowers and things like that, but the operational procedures that go on there when you pass through them, I am not convinced that they should be a part of the fabric of the town. So I don't know how we get to that further discussion, Madam Mayor, of looking at these 7. But
I was just thinking, I think we can vote on the appeal, but then give direction.
Okay.
Further direction afterwards, if that's what you want to do. And I'm not
going
saying
in that
which way to vote, but you're saying you would like to vote no on the appeal, and then we can have a further discussion.
Thank you.
Ms. Schneider, and then Mr. House.
Well, I think one thing everyone agrees on is that what's there now is certainly not pleasing to the eye, and it's been up there too long in that state. And so when I hear you say, Councilmember Barnwell, it's been there for 2 years and I don't like them, that is something that was a temporary state that should not have been taking that long to be in that state to begin with. I mean, I'm looking at the council minutes when all 7 of us approved this to go forward from April 11th, 2006, and that's over a year ago. And I remember distinctively saying when we went through this can only work if we can move forward and get these things finished, because the cones and the flags and the temporary nature of it is going to create more problems. And guess what? It's over a year later and it's creating more problems. I'm not convinced that the final version when they come up are going to create the same kind of problems. I used to live in the San Marcan area, not on Stanley Drive, but nearby, and when the chicanes were first put in, I was like, what are those things? And once they were put in, I said, oh, I get it. That now I have to really be careful not to speed down Stanley Drive, because that was a shortcut going from Las Positas down to to Delavina Street. And you got used to them because you had to pay attention to where you were going. And I think that's the point of the traffic calming device, is to calm traffic. And if there are problems with the current figuration of a temporary structure, I think we need to really see what the permanent structure is, and we said that over a year ago. And so it's a bit frustrating to not have anything happen in the course of 15 or 13 months and still have the same frustrations, because I share those frustrations. I share a lot of the frustration that's in the room, but I just think the way out of the frustration is to finish the product. So I disagree in that sense of the people who want to uphold the appeal, but so I don't think we're capable to make that kind of determination on the effectiveness of a finished product when we haven't had a finished product. So in terms of what's before us, in terms of an ABR appeal, I will vote to deny the appeal. I do want to look very carefully once it's in place and seeing what's worked. I appreciated staff talking with the fire chief again, and really looking at what is it that needs to occur in terms of a public safety standpoint, and there were changes made, and I think that's something we're going to have to continue looking at. People aren't used to these kind of devices in this area. There are other parts of the world where they're all over the place and they work just fine. So, and I've driven on them, so around them, not on them. So I'll be voting to deny the appeal.
Okay, Mr. House.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Neighborhood Traffic Management Program is something I just want to bring us back to for a moment, because I've heard a number of people tonight, and we've read a lot of email on both sides, by the way. We get quite a bit of communication before we come here. But a lot of accusations that somehow we're not listening to the community, and the intention, and for those of you who don't know, the intention for which the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program was put into the circulation element was to empower neighborhoods to deal with traffic and mobility issues with resources to help address problems that they were facing, so that they could actually have the support of our staff and support of the city in accomplishing improvements that they felt were important and necessary. And that's the purpose of having a neighborhood traffic management program as part of our policy, and then ultimately, and Dr. Von Hengel helped us to draft it, and through tremendous public process, to be able to offer that as a resource to the community and to the neighborhoods. That's its purpose, is to do, I think, what Ms. McLaughlin towards the end said, power to the people. It was to really empower neighborhoods to be able to address issues that they felt were important. And there were other neighborhoods that wanted to be part of the first pilot neighborhood traffic management program. And this neighborhood was the one that was chosen because of the issues that had risen during the first time that the St. Francis attempt to keep that hospital alive. The traffic problems came up, and there was money supposedly set aside to make improvements here, and then that project went away. So the city stayed true to addressing these things and created this program for this area. From my watch, it was remarkably participative. There were lots of people participating. The fire trucks were out there trying to maneuver around. Remember all the stuff that was put in the intersections to see? All sorts of cones out there trying to make it work. And the reason that people were trying so hard was that the neighbors had said these are intersections where people are speeding through and where we're having accidents and near accidents, and we need some help. So with that background, I mean, I really have felt very strong that once that they had come up with a program they felt good about and that they wanted to see happen, that we should really honor that. And I've stayed really true to that, and I think the council has as well. I want to admit that when the first ones went in, the ones with the sawhorses and all that kind of stuff, I was really upset because, I mean, I know that these things can work. There's other places, and Mr. Furtick was referencing places in Washington State where there are multitudes of these small. They're similar to what we see here, but they're more elegant, and yet they're all over the place. And neighborhood after neighborhood is asking for them because they do work to slow traffic in the neighborhoods. But I was really upset because they looked confusing. They didn't seem like they could possibly work. They messed up the geometry. And then the current state went in, and once again, I was very disappointed because I felt like there would be a rejection by the neighbors, which I think I can see. You know, there's people here tonight who are really upset about these, and they're ugly and in this half-finished state for so long. Now, I use them daily. I ride my bicycle through 2 of them every single day, and I drive my van. I have a pickup, or excuse me, a delivery van, and I drive through the same area all the time. I live up on Jimeno near APS, and I don't have the tiniest bit of problem with them. I'm surprised, honestly, that people are having such a confusion with the use of them. They're very easy to negotiate as far as I'm concerned. What they do for me is they slow me down. They just slow me down. In the past, before they were there, I'll admit I came down Alta Vista just probably way too fast, and now I don't. And there's another one just down a little ways, and I find myself slowing down and negotiating around it. So if I'm any test case, they work. I wish there were a way for us to address the concerns of the neighbors, the ones that they had in the beginning, in a more graceful way. You know the bulb outs in front of Roosevelt School and the improvements to that intersection. You know, those work. The kids have a shorter distance to cross the street. People can make the turn very smoothly and very easily, and there's a sense of it is truly a calmer area. And there's a lot of people that use that area, but it doesn't seem to have that in-your-faceness that some of the small roundabouts have. And I think Mr. Unterman had spoken to that earlier about the value of those kinds of bulb outs in small neighborhood environment. If we continue along the path that's being suggested here, I would really like us to keep in mind at places where perhaps having the device in the center of the intersection is found to be problematic, that we go back to something that we're finding works elsewhere, and that is the bulb outs that don't go out so far as a parked car, but they create that sense of, they pacify the street at those intersections. In any case, on the grounds that are in front of us here tonight, I won't support the appeal. But I do believe that as these come into their own and we see them in their finished state, there should be room for improvement. And we shouldn't be closing the door on looking to see where they're working, and if they really honestly aren't, they are not there forever and ever and a day. We can alter those, and I think we should keep an open mind as to where they're working and where they're not. The last point, as I recall, our idea in having a few of them right now was to see what worked and what didn't. I don't mean just for this temporary, but I mean ultimately the geometry of certain intersections is repeated all over the city. There's different places. So if we found that we had something that really did work in a certain size intersection, and we feel really good about it, and get the kind of feedback that we continue to get from the neighbors who live right adjacent to these intersections that we have, where we have them now, which is very positive. We get a lot of positives from them. Then we'll have something that if we had another place where a neighborhood would like to have them, we could put them in without this tremendous, long, protracted, awful process. So that's my piece, and I won't be able to support the appeal.
Okay, Mr. Horton?
I'm going to have a couple suggestions for you. To start out, I agree with many of the speakers that said there's confusion with the mini roundabouts. In fact, I think there's confusion with the big ones. I use all of them all the time, and I still see confusion at Milpas and Salinas. And I don't know whether that has to do with signing or what. I know this kind of traffic device works in Europe and in Japan and most of the rest of the world. Australia was mentioned tonight. But we still are having confusion, and it may be that we could look at some of these other countries, and there may be some visual clue that we're not using here that they're using, because I still see people that really don't know what to do, and I think that's a problem. I think that we need to have a process for continuing to take input. I mean, whatever happens tonight, I don't think it should be the end of this. I think it's too important. And if we do deny the appeal, then I still want there to be a way for input to come in and that to be recorded somewhere. So it's not, it just doesn't enter the case of a public inquiry, but it actually goes to a file somewhere so we can collect it and see and test it, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think since I'm a founding member of the Pearl Chase Society, and I've sat in most of those meetings, and I know that many of the issues in that society and in the neighborhoods deal with the way these things look sitting in the neighborhoods, and it's basically my neighborhood too, and I don't like the way they look. But I think we need to give it a fair trial, and I think we need to make them look like they do in Seattle. I've seen pictures of those, and they look pretty good. And I would like to see us try that. I'm not sure, as some of my colleagues, that all the ones we have are correct. I'm not sure that we need all the ones we have, and I'm not sure that they're installed correctly, the ones that are. And I would like us to take a very close look at the design aspects and make sure that we've got that right. One of the slides put up, I think, at the very beginning, overlaid the traffic circle on the pedestrian path. And I think that it's possible that we could take another look at the way that's laid out and move the crosswalks further away from the center of the diameter to make it safer for school kids. And my major concern would be the school kids. And if it takes moving the crosswalks back or making some other adjustment, then let's just do that. Let's not wait. One of my suggestions would be that I'd like to see whatever motion is made, if it is to deny, that we officially bring it back. I would propose a year. I'm open to suggestions from my colleagues, but that we don't just let it sit, but that we have a time that we'll be looking forward, and that's why I think it's important to collect the input, so that when we bring it back, we won't have to be searching around for the input. We'll have it, and then we can really study what's going on and tweak it. Something as significant as this to the entire community needs to have a chance to be modified and looked at and thought about. So I'm going to go along with denying the appeal, but I do want to have a way of making sure that we're doing the right thing, and I think that by bringing it back in a time period, which I will suggest is a year, would satisfy me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think the goal here is to have safer streets. And when we say Santa Barbara safe streets, nobody could deny that. I mean, everybody agrees that we want safer streets. We want to slow down the cars, though. And frankly, you know, in my 12th year here, that is the most common thing in all the neighborhoods throughout the whole city, is that people are driving too fast, but especially up by the high school. And I'm not just blaming the high school kids. It might be the parents taking them there. But whatever it is, they're driving too fast and too recklessly, and it's dangerous. So that's how we got started on this. We said, let's go up and talk to the people in the St. Francis neighborhood. And maybe instead of having a democracy, we ought to just tell them what to do without even talking to them, because this has been one of the more frustrating things that I've ever gone through, because we've gone up there, we had lots of meetings, we listened to the neighbors, we heard what they wanted, we looked at their plan, we okayed the plan, then we had this little transportation committee and we talked about it and we said, well, let's just try these first. And maybe not even do the others, and then this has gone on so long, not being put in permanently. It's just way too long, and I'm not blaming anybody on the whole thing, but it's just one of the more frustrating things. And then people come up and say, you aren't listening to us. I think part of the problem is we're almost listening too much, because everybody's talked to us about this. I mean, it's probably the thing I've spent the most time on. The bottom line for me is we need safe streets, and we need to slow down, and we had those lawn signs that said slow down Santa Barbara. If we can do that again, but we need to do that, and people need to take a deep breath and just take a minute longer to get there, and it's not going to kill you to be 6 minutes downtown instead of 5 minutes, or that sort of thing. I will not vote to uphold the appeal. I think they're aiming in the wrong direction and blaming the staff and blaming the meetings or whatever that sort of thing is. I think we have to look at the issue, and the issue is how do we get some safe streets and how do we slow down the traffic. I will support not when there are, let me just go back a second, when there are mini circles, that's what we're calling them, or mini roundabouts, I don't like also having the bulb outs, because talk about confusion. And I'm pretty good at the Milpas roundabout, you know. I kind of look to my left and then look to my right and I can go. But these are you have to kind of drive a little bit around the bulb out and then you want to go to the right. And I've seen a lot of them that just go on through, because they don't want to deal with it. There's not that a lot of traffic, so they just don't want to deal with it. So I just don't think bulb outs go with the mini circles. I think maybe if you could take the bulb outs off and just have the mini circles, or take the mini circles out and just have the bulb outs, that would be better. That's just my opinion. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm just telling you that. Hopefully that would slow down the traffic. I think they have to go in permanently. I agree with Mr. Horton. I'd like to get a report back, but not until they're in there permanently, and I'd like them to be in there within a month and a half. I'll give you, okay, then we'll make it a month if it's too long. I just think they need to go in there with the sandstone or whatever it's going to look like and have it look good. And I know the Bungalow Haven Group is going to help us with the landscaping and help us, and even Santa Barbara Beautiful has said that they can help us, but it needs to go in there and it needs to look good. And then in a year you can come back and tell us how terrible they are, or how wonderful they are, or how you're not sure about them. But let's move something along here. I will entertain a motion. Yeah, we have to stop the confusion. I'll entertain a motion to deny the appeal, and then we can talk about the next.
So moved.
Second. Okay, is there a second? Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Now, next step.
If I may, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Barnwell and Mr. Williams.
I understand that time is of the essence, and I agree with everybody that we want to get this thing rolling. We don't want to have any more delays. But a motion that I would be willing to accept, as we always do, that staff and the council subcommittee evaluate the 7 intersections and consider redesign or removal of the least effective of them.
Okay.
I'll second that, but I asked for one thing back in April, and there's no reason that staff necessarily would have this yet because we haven't completed the project yet. But what I asked for then was statistics on what has happened out at those intersections, and so that we can, and so I think this should not be driven by anecdotes. This should be driven by data. But I really think that we need to do that, because otherwise then Joe's going to go out and try to get as many Bungalow Haven people go out to pack the room, and Michael's going to try to go out and try to get as many Santa Barbara Safe Streets folks to pack the room, and that's not how we should design traffic engineering devices.
Right. That's right.
As much as I think public input is really important, we should be doing this with data.
The problem is they were going to do the data when they got put in there permanently,
right?
Which I think is wonderful, but it's like a chicken and egg thing. Mr. Barnwell, did you have?
No, I was just going to say maybe that that in the motion that the evaluation of the 7 intersections include whatever data is available on their success.
Okay.
In that evaluation of which need redesign or removal of the least effective of them.
Okay. Mr. Horton and then Ms. Falcone.
Well, I'm okay with the motion, but there's 2 things that aren't in there, I guess, and maybe I missed it, but I want us to look at this thing in a year.
Okay.
After they're put in.
Yeah, after they're installed as they're supposed to look.
Let's add that to the motion. Okay, with that seconder.
I want staff to have a process for collecting the input. I don't know. What happens now, it seems like we get emails. Some of it comes into the administrator's office. Some of it goes down there. I don't know what happens, but this is too important. And I don't know. I don't think we can do it from the dais tonight. Right. But I want you to come up with something that we publish soon about how people can get input, so that when we do look at it, it'll be regularized and not just a collection of notes and phone messages. So that's what I would like to have.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ms. Kent.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we're hearing from the dais is really actually what the most important piece is really data about the performance of these particular roundabouts. And yes, there will be opinions. There'll probably continue to be opinions back and forth on each side. But I think that the staff's focus is going to be on the data collection relative to slowing and accidents and other types of data.
Right. Okay, Ms. Falcone?
Well, I think Dr. Van Enkel wants to jump in. I'm happy to let you do that, and then I do have
Drew.
a comment.
Thank you. I'm Drew Van Hengel. I work in the Transportation Planning and Operations Divisions. There's an opportunity for education here regarding what we've seen already with the semi-permanent installations, and we did do some speed surveys last month to try to get a before or after, if you so to speak, because we're not in the permanent configuration. And we're seeing in the neighborhood an overall reduction in prevailing speed, and it's different for each of the installations. On Garden Street, for example, we've seen before the installations went in, we saw over 40% of our drivers driving over 35 miles per hour, and that number is down to 5% now with the installation that's in place. Olive Street, similarly, from over 20% down to about 7%. And overall, over all the streets where we did surveys, which were the same ones we did before we started the whole process, we're seeing reduction in excessive speed that of those over 35 miles per hour of over 70% on the streets with traffic calming and over 50% on the streets without traffic calming. We're seeing a reduction in the prevailing speed, which is a speed that we set the speed limit of over 6% on the streets without traffic, with traffic calming, and no change in that 85th percentile for the streets without. And finally, interestingly enough, we're seeing an overall, there's been some concern about the shift of traffic because of these features. And we're actually seeing seen over a 5% reduction in volume on the streets with traffic calming and over a 20% reduction in volume on the streets without traffic calming, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And so something's happening out there.
Where
And
are
to
they
look at the
going?
future, we brought the plan forward to you with, it's 7 components of a plan that has 17 elements in it. And what we think we're seeing happening is, one, there's been a change in land use in St. Francis, which might account for some of the change in behavior. Also, obviously, gas prices may affect driving behavior. Excuse me. And finally, there may be a spreading effect, so that even though we're seeing like a 30% reduction in heavy speeders on Garden Street and only maybe a 5% on the lower traffic volume streets, people seem to be more aware in this neighborhood that there are traffic calming features throughout the neighborhood, and that may be causing a spillover throughout all of the streets that we surveyed. So.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Falcone?
Thank you very much. Maybe you could send that information to us in some sort of an email form, and maybe send it to the public as well, because that's great information and we need to know that. But as a point of clarification for the motion, just so I'm clear, what you are suggesting or what you've moved is that in a year after we have made them permanent in a month, and
It's not going to happen, I can tell, but we've got to push this. I mean, I'll go out and pour some concrete, and I won't know what I'm doing.
We'll go for soon, how's that?
Okay, as soon as possible.
And there's been a permanency for a while that we bring it back in a year, and that's when the subcommittee is going to begin to study the ones?
No,
Okay.
that's not what was said.
You're going to start studying them now. Then I can support that.
We're not even going to study them, we're going to really work with it.
Yeah.
More than study.
Okay, so you're going to have an effect, the subcommittee's going to actually have an effect on what the permanency of these things
Yes.
look like.
That's right.
I can support that.
Yes.
That's right.
And it will also, just to clarify, it will also include the data collection that Mr. Williams is talking about, and it will also include a uniform and patterned manner to take public input.
Yes.
So that we have a way that we're collecting this input. It's going to a certain place, and we're looking at it in a cohesive way rather than the scattershot that's been the way we've been receiving it.
Okay,
let's vote.
Yeah, okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
Madam
Mr. Allen?
Just real quick, I will have my staff work on setting the meeting up with the subcommittee, because we
Okay.
are ready to turn the drawings over to construction to go out to bid on the project, so we need to get this evaluation process moving fairly quickly.
Okay, I understand, and we're not pushing you for 2 weeks, but as soon as we can. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your good testimony. Meeting is adjourned.